And the final question came to me via private message, and it was from Eddie Walgren, who asked if he could see an example of ink transfer like I was talking about last week. Well, the answer is yes. This is an example of ink transfer. It is the ghostly visage of Julio Bequer. Now, you may be wondering, what the heck is Julio Bequer's image doing on an index card? Well, what he did, and fortunately, I mean, he did it with all the good intent in the world, but he added in two customs of his own that were not completely dry. And one of those customs actually turned out just fine, thankfully. But the other one, and the one that turned out fine, I actually like a little bit better. It's a 1961 inaugural Minnesota Twins custom. But the other one, that did not turn out as well, and actually there was a significant portion of black ink, not color ink, but black ink, that transferred to this index card. And one of the things, by the way, that I should add is that black ink, if you plan on making your own cards, black ink takes a little bit longer to dry than color ink, in my experiences. So I hope that was a little bit educational. Now, the final thing that I will address, which is a tip, is something I actually saw on a friend's Facebook page. Now, this friend is not a baseball collector, but they are an autograph collector. And they collect autographed 8x10s that are signed in paint pen, silver Sharpie, and gold Sharpie. Now, that's something that can translate to baseball. So I think that this is very, very relevant to what's going on now. And that is, how do you store an item that has been signed in paint pen or gold Sharpie or silver Sharpie? Well, there's actually an entire YouTube video devoted to how to store 8x10s that are signed in paint pen or silver Sharpie or gold Sharpie. And I watched that video. I think it's excellent. And the individual who did that, I'm sorry I don't remember your name, but as he pointed out, he said, stay away from the cheap 8x10 holders that are made by Avery, and go with Ultra Pro, which are holders that are made for a 3-ring binder. He also mentioned that there were top loaders that were specifically made for 8x10s, and that while these were good for a couple of days, they were definitely not a long-term storage solution, because he'd experimented with them and there was a lot of transfer, especially from paint pens, and to a lesser degree from gold and silver Sharpies. But they were okay for a few days. So if you want to try that TTM, you might want to avoid it, but if you want to do that IP, since you're going to let it dry for 5-10 minutes anyway, that's probably okay. Now, what he didn't address was cards, and the same logic actually applies. Just avoid the cheap 9-pocket card holders that are really cheap, the generic brand. Go with Ultra Pro card holders, and avoid direct contact with a top loader for more than a couple of days. What might help in storage would be I would actually say that what you could do is you could take, if you have spare 9-pocket binder pages left over made by Ultra Pro, since unfortunately they've stopped making their little single pocket things, what you could do is you could actually just cut them out, pop the card in, and you could store it in a shoebox or cardboard box type arrangement. That way you wouldn't get ink transfer, and by the way, the answer is yes. If you put a lot of weight on a gold Sharpie or silver Sharpie, there is going to be ink transfer. I also wanted to answer a person's question on YouTube where they said, is the Yankees, is the Mets and Yankees pitcher Corey Lidle? And the answer is no. He pitched long before Corey Lidle. The other one that I wanted to address was there were two of my assertions last week that actually were disputed a bit. One was written versus typed, and I'm not going to name names here because I don't want to get into a debate or anything, but written versus typed, there are 16 threads on SCN on written versus typed, involving over 45 different users, including 4 guys who decided to send to not real long shots, but moderately tough guys with a 50-50 mix of typed letters and written letters, but that contained a lot of information and were very high quality in terms of the writing. And they found there was really no difference. And again, where one individual said, well, Rick Monday doesn't sign typed items and Johnny with typed letters, and Johnny Damon does not sign with typed letters. I actually asked around about Johnny Damon from the people who were getting him back, and as it turned out, about half of the 6 people that about half of the 7 people, because I asked for 4 people got back written, 3 people got back typed. So with Johnny Damon, if it was true, it's certainly not true anymore. And also, Johnny Damon does not take 9 to 10 days anymore. He takes between 150 and actually 150 days in a year. I did notice, though, that one thing was, in the latest wave of Johnny Damon returns, a lot of people were reporting that they weren't seeing Kansas City Royals cards. So I don't know if that's his hobby or just happened to be a coincidence, or his, not his hobby, sorry, his new approach to the hobby, or just a coincidence. And the other disputed one was that you still needed a top loader and a penny sleeve. Well, and this individual had a really, really rotten post office, evidently. So I'll concede, if your post office is regularly destroying your letters, maybe it would be a good idea to go with a to go with the top loader. But I still say leave out the penny sleeve. And with the top loader, you can take a post-it note, actually, just like my show prep is on, and you can actually stick it to the front of the top loader and just say remove card before signing. And believe me, people will understand that even if they do have trouble getting it out. But the insistence that a